Amen. So we read from Desire of Ages, page 628, paragraph 1. Jesus did not answer his disciples by taking up separately the destruction of Jerusalem and the great day of his coming. He mingled the description of these two events. Why did he do that? Why did he mingle them?
In mercy, so that they may not faint the faith, that they may endure the sight.
So in mercy, my brother?
Because they thought they were not going to endure the sight.
In mercy.
Yeah.
My brother?
To separate two classes.
How did that separate two classes? By merging the destruction of Jerusalem with the end of the world. How does that create two classes?
Because everybody says that he did it to leave it upon his disciples to study and know what he meant. So only those who will come and study diligently will understand what he meant. Those who don't study will understand. So two classes.
So, did the disciples understand?
No.
So what class would they be if he's developing two classes?
He left them to understand. So those who will come and study diligently will understand. Those who don't do it diligently will not understand.
Okay, so my question was, not at that time, but later on, in some time in that history, were the disciples studying and they worked this all out?
They understood.
Sorry?
They understood.
They did? My brother?
I would agree with my brother here, because in the quote says that Jesus did not answer.
Don't read the quote to us. You tell us what you think.
They would have lost sight. They would not have enjoyed the sight. I think that the message was too much for them, so we combined them.
Okay, my brother?
I think the reason he makes the event was according to the question that was asked, so that they understand what it's going to give. To separate the two questions that they asked.
So Jesus separates them or combines them?
Combine them, but the disciples are now going to separate them because the question that they asked two full questions about the destruction of Jerusalem and the second coming, but Christ is now going to make them.
So you're saying it's not because of mercy to them, and not to develop two classes, you give a different third reason.
If it is mercy, then Christ is now going to repeat what is here, but it's not repeating, it's just mixing the event.
So is that a yes or a no to my question? He's not doing it in mercy, and he's not doing it to create two classes, he's doing it for your third reason.
Yeah, it's not doing it for me.
Okay. My sister?
I didn't get the question.
Sorry?
I didn't get the question.
Jesus did not answer his disciples by taking up separately the destruction of Jerusalem and the great day of his coming. He mingled them together. My question is, why did he mingle them?
First, it was in mercy because they could not handle it. And then the discourse was supposed to be twofold. For the disciples and for those who should be at the end of the world.
Okay, can you hear what she said?
Yes.
Yeah, good. My sister?
The future was filled with the disciples. The future was massively failing from the disciples. They could not endure the sight. So Christ mingled so that in the process they could understand.
Okay. Brother Andrew, do you agree that it's in mercy?
Sure.
Yeah? You agree with those answers, it's in mercy. Could you tell me, what is the mercy that Jesus is showing to his disciples by combining this history and this history? He combines them, joins them into one. Show me why that's merciful.
Okay, so it is mercy in the sense that it would be a terrible one to them if
if he separated to them, as in they couldn't endure it. So because of that, he blended it so that he who is willing to know may study for themselves and understand. But if he was going to unfold it as he himself is seeing it, then they couldn't bear it.
No whispering, please. No whispering, please. You haven't told me what the mercy is. I didn't understand your answer. I understand about the blending, but tell me why that's merciful. He says you're going to be destroyed, and he says the world's going to end, and he says they're going to happen at the same time. Why is that merciful?
Okay, I think that is merciful because maybe I can explain it in another way that to be merciful to somebody is like something that is going to happen. I don't know how I can put this right, but maybe I can explain it this way. Consider I have a woman that I'm supposed to be married with, and she's prepared to marry with me, and she's willing to be with me. But then the thing is, the kind of life that I want to live, she cannot bear. Then in mercy, I'll tell her, please, I understand that you really have a feeling for me and to stay with me, but basing on the place and how I want to live, you cannot feel it. So in mercy, I'll be telling her, we cannot be together. So I mean, that's how I can.
Okay, I understand that story about mercy. She loves you, and she wouldn't be able to endure your lifestyle. So you say we can't marry. But tell me how Jesus says the destruction of Jerusalem is going to be 2,000 years before the destruction of the world. To hide that information, why is that mercy? Do you believe it's mercy? He does this combining work?
Yeah, I believe according to the statement, but to explain it is a difficult.
Okay, so you won't be able to explain? Okay.
According to what I'm understanding, is that this entire discourse was not only for the apostles, but it was also pointing to the last generation, those who are to live until the destruction of the world. So when Christ was combining these two histories, the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world, it was like he was showing a sign of mercy to the last generation, that whatever will happen in the destruction of Jerusalem is the same thing that is going to happen. So it's giving us as a warning.
Why is that merciful to us? Because we know Jesus was not even telling the truth. They're not to be combined. We have to go in and we have to undo that combining work, so it becomes harder for us. So why is that merciful for us? When we know it's wrong to combine them, we should keep them separate. So why is there mercy?
Let's combine them, that we separate them and understand, learn from the past history. It was a sign of mercy to give us these messages.
So tell me the mercy. I still don't get why that's merciful.
The sign of mercy that was given was the message that he gives us a warning, and we can learn from what happened from Jerusalem as the last generation.
Why is it merciful to the disciples?
For them it was pointing to the destruction, but it is also pointing to ours. That's why he combines them.
Yeah, but he says they're the same event. I still don't get why that's mercy. If he had said, first the destruction, then the end of the world, why isn't that mercy? Why is it merciful if you join them? My brother?
The Jews understand that once Jerusalem is destroyed, it's over. But Christ, because Christ understood that there are people who are to be raised, to be God's people, other than the Jews. If the disciples understood that it is going even to take a very long time for the end of the world to be, not at age 70, and God is of course going to raise another class of people, not them. they could not be able to endure that sight.
What sight?
So that's
What sight can't they endure?
because they think they're the only people. When they're destroyed, that is the end of everything.
And to find out that they're not the only people, they can't endure that.
They can't endure that. To know that there is so many years to come, they can't endure that sight. That's why you didn't them.
Okay, so let me ask you if you believe that. So Jesus is merciful because he says you can't handle that once Jerusalem's destroyed, there's going to be a long time before the end of the world. So that's mercy.
Yes.
So when Paul says, let me tell you that the end of the world is nowhere near here, he's being unmerciful. And he got all that information from whom? Like Satan or someone. So how you reconcile that then? God's mercy and his unmercifulness.
Paul, I don't think Paul is addressing the Jews in Thessalonians. He's addressing the Gentiles who have been converted to Christianity.
Okay, but there's no Jew and Gentile. They're all mixed together now.
His audience is people who don't think that they are the only people of God. Other than Christ's audience, who thinks that when they're destroyed, that's the end of everything. I don't think the audience of Paul had the same theology like those people.
Okay. Who had their hands up?
Okay. I see it massively in the sense that when Christ was mingling the same thing, the destruction of Jerusalem as brothers put it is going to show the destruction of the world. But what is that which led to the destruction of Jerusalem? So it will give light to those who are not live at the end of the world to know what led to the destruction of Jerusalem is the same thing that will also lead to the destruction of the world. And Christ is giving this to the disciples, such that when that time comes or is near, they will be having some kind of preparation that they will be doing. And we also see that he gave them a sign that when they see the Jerusalem being compassed by armies, they are going to flee. So he's also going to tell us the same thing at the end of the world, that when we see these signs coming, there is a work of preparation that we need to do before that time, so that we flee from the wrath that is coming.
Okay, but tell me about the disciples, because you told us about you. Why is it merciful for them?
This is to give them preparation.
Of what?
Of that kind of destruction which is coming, and also to give warning to some of the people who are also going to be given.
They're not going to even experience it, this destruction here. So it's not, what benefit is it giving them?
Like, if they are to know the very time which Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, then they are going to do some preparation.
Okay, that's fine. We've got that. What's the S stand for? Signs. That's the preparation time. You prepare for that. Why mingle it with this?
He's mingling them together because for us to go and learn.
No, them, not us. Them.
The disciples.
Yeah. Okay, so there's still hands up. Let's go back to this passage. Let's go back to this passage. Jesus did not answer his disciples by taking up separately the destruction of Jerusalem and the great day of his coming. He mingled the description of these two events. Had he opened to his disciples future events as he beheld them, they would have been unable to endure the sight. So there were people who had their hands up. I don't want to make any more comment on that. So I want to ask another question now. Third sentence, had he opened to his disciples future events as he beheld them. So what I want us to, or you to tell me, what are the future events that she's talking about here? So, everybody understand? What are the future events that she's referring to now in this sentence? So let's just summarize. He doesn't take up the destruction of Jerusalem. Is that future? That's future. And the great day of his coming, that's future. He mingled the description of these two future events together. Had he opened to his disciples future events as he beheld them, they would have been unable to endure the sight. In mercy, he blended the description of the two great crises, which are both future. So, Brother William, what is these future events that she's talking about?
I think in this context, what I know she's saying is that how I understand it, if Christ is not standing, he's telling them something which is coming in 70 AD, and then he'll tell them something which is coming at the end of the world.
So
both of them are future, but now the reason why he's mingling the future event of 70 AD.
I'm not asking you that question.
Yeah.
I'm asking, just tell me what, third sentence, he opened to his disciples future events. Tell me what the future events are. Just list them. Is it, no, you tell me. Okay, I won't do multiple choice.
Yeah, I'm having difficulties in reconciling future events in my mind because both 70 AD and the end of the world, both of them are future.
Is that what she's talking about here? That's all I'm asking. When she says future events, what is she referring to?
This must be the end of the world.
Okay, so you're saying the future events, had he opened to his disciples the end of the world, the events of the end of the world, as he saw them, they wouldn't have been able to handle it.
Yeah.
Yep. So he doesn't tell them.
Sorry?
So he doesn't tell them?
He tells them, but he mingles them. He mingles them.
Okay. So all I'm asking is, your future events, you're saying it's these ones here. That's what you're saying. That's what you just said. You agree that's what you said? No, I'm just asking, did I understand that's what you said?
Yes, that is what
Okay, that's fine. Okay, you can think a bit more, but that's what you said. That's what I wanted to make sure. My sister, then Brother Robert.
Future events for the disciples was the crucifixion of Christ and the resurrection of the 70 AD.
So she says, had he opened to his disciples the future events, like the destruction of Jerusalem, they wouldn't have been able to cope. But that's exactly what he does. He opens to their understanding the destruction of Jerusalem. That's why they're asking the question. He says, your house is about to be destroyed. They said, that can't happen. He says, let me tell you. And he goes into explicit detail. So he opened it up to them, I think.
When I read it, great controversy, the destruction of Jerusalem, I just see there that they did not understand what Christ was saying. The destruction of Jerusalem was not clear to the disciples, even the crucifixion. So, because they did not understand the crucifixion of Christ, the disciples came to Christ in Matthew chapter 24 to show Christ the temple. In their mind, they had a thought that Christ was to reign as a king.
Because it says, what shall be the sign of thy coming? 24 verse 3. They know he's coming again. So they know something, because he's already told them, I'm coming again. So that must mean he's going away somewhere. So they know he's coming back, he's going to leave them. They may not know the details of the crucifixion, how it's going to happen, but they know he's leaving. We know that for certain, because they asked that question. Brother Robert.
I'm just having to say, had he opened to his disciples future events as he beheld them, they would not have been, and they would not have been.
You don't need to read it to us. We've all read it.
Yeah, they would.
Just tell us what the future events are.
I'm not understanding because he's already opening these events as they will come. So I'm failing to see what this quote means when it says that had he.
Okay, so you don't know.
Yeah.
Brother Rogers, the future events. Oh wait, there, my brother.
This statement here, as we beheld them. So I think the view of Christ is not the view of the disciples. I think that is very different things. And Christ is not giving them his view, he's giving them a merciful view.
That's fine, but just tell me the view of what?
The events.
Which ones?
Destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world.
Okay, so the future events are these two.
Yeah.
Okay. Brother Rogers, then Brother Wilson.
Okay. If you look at the structure of the sentence,
Tell us the answer first, then you can tell us why you come to your conclusion.
destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world.
Okay, so the same. Okay. Brother Wilson.
I mean, the future events is the 1260 at the end of the world. Not speaking, the future events is not speaking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Because Christ has already told them that Jerusalem was going to be done to be destroyed. Now, the future event that Christ is speaking about is the 1260 at the end of the world, not the destruction of Jerusalem.
Okay, so now he's the first person who's mentioned the 1260 and the end of the world. So it says, had he opened to his disciples the end of the world, if he had told them about the end of the world, they would not have been able to cope. But he did tell them about the end of the world. You get your hand up?
Yeah, according to my understanding is that
You don't have to say that, because
so he disclosed to them about the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world, but he didn't mention about the 1260, the persecution that was to befall upon them.
So
I think what he never,
So what's the future events?
the persecution of the 1260.
The 1260. Okay, so let's read another passage. Let me find it. Okay, this is, we just read 628. Let's go down a couple of pages. We're going to go to 630. 630. Maybe I've cut into this. From? Is it begin from? No. Okay. 630. I need to go back to the original then. 1 second. Oh wait, there. Maybe I've got a typo. Yeah, sorry, 630.5. I didn't say that. I didn't give the paragraph number. So it should begin with from.
Yeah.
Are we all there? From the destruction of Jerusalem, Christ passed on rapidly to the greater event. What's the greater event? Second coming. So we're all on the same page. The last link in the chain of this earth's history, the coming of the Son of God in majesty and glory. Between these two events, we'll just stop there. Between these two events, there's two questions. Jerusalem and the end of the world. That's their two questions. Because remember, there were four of them, and we split them between sign and destruction, sign and destruction. Between the two questions, he's going to answer both questions. And then he says between the two events, which he's going to mingle. He mingles these two events. Between these two events, they're laid open to Christ's view. What did it say in 628? As he beheld. So we've got that as he beheld those future events. The coming of the Son of God, between these two events, they're laid open to Christ's view long centuries of darkness, centuries for his church marked with blood and tears and agony. This is the 1260. Upon these scenes, his disciples could not then endure to look, and Jesus passed them by with a brief mention. So there's just a brief mention. We'll stop there. So this is why we were struggling earlier to get these signs and destruction not to work very easily. We were coming up with these different answers. Maybe it was 1773. Then we were, if you're going to do that, you're shifting now to the destruction and the signs of the papacy. which probably isn't really following the same kind of theme across here. Or you'd have to say this was all a destruction, 1200 years of destruction, which was preceded by some signs, which would probably be Pergamos. You'd go Pergamos, Thyatira. Or you'd go from paganism to papalism, as Sister Joy was saying. So it's not clear what's going on in this history. It's a bit blank. And the reason for that is because that's not what Christ's mission was. He answers their questions. So you ask a question of God, He'll answer your question. You ask a bad question, you get a bad answer back. So this is a lot of our problems, because we don't ask good questions, even in our personal devotional life. You're bound to get bad answers coming back. The Millerites fell into this trap. They don't ask God what the sanctuary is, they ask their pastors, because they all know. And so if you already know what a sanctuary is, you don't ask God, He won't answer it, and you get into a whole heap of mess. So I want to suggest that the future events in that third sentence is this dark ages, which He beheld, and He doesn't want to show the disciples about those things. Because even if you go to the captivity, the Babylonian captivity, even if you go to the destruction of Jerusalem, the first destruction, the bloodshed there wasn't that bad. They kill Zedekiah's children, they pluck his eyes out, a few people get killed, there's lots of people going into captivity, but it's really not bad. The captivity itself, the 70 years, which parallels the 1260, how much killing and mayhem was there in the 70 years? There's none. In fact, in the 70 years, they're prospering, aren't they? They're told to go and build houses and have a good time. Not like the 1260. So, there are subtle differences between the 70 and the 1260. So, coming back to 628. It's easy to read into this sentence that the future events are these ones, or one of them, or a combination of them. Now, it's easy in hindsight when you've got 630.5 to bring into this. But if you read this now, obviously we know the answer, can you see that it would not necessarily have to be Jerusalem or the end of the world? Contextually, if you think about it, we know we've got 3 periods. We've got the tribulation, I've got the days, but we could put the Great Tribulation. If you see the amount of detail that you have on this one, or this one, you see that there's no details here. It's very little detail, very little information. So it's an agreement with what Spirit of Prophecy says. We could have worked that out. Sister Emma.
I don't know if I'm seeing that. I'm disagreeing. I think it's clear, he makes it clear that this is a tribulation such as never was since the beginning, and that if it wasn't shortened, then no flesh be saved. And I'm still asking the question, if you say it's the 1260, why is that mercy to them? Because they're seeing all these other things in the description, and that's pretty bad what he just said about the dark ages. He referenced it as being the worst time in Earth's history. He doesn't go into it, but still, I don't see why that would have overwhelmed them if he had opened that up, because it's not in their time period. Because I'm seeing this as not happening.
This isn't in their time period either, and he opens this up to them.
No, so why does he mingle those two events? The thing I'm...
Because they mingled them.
Yeah, they mingled them.
He mingles them because they did.
But he still does it in mercy that he mingles it. And the only thing that I'm picking up from what it says...
Okay, so tell me the mercy that he mingles these two events. Why is that merciful?
I think it's mercy because he doesn't show it as he sees it, which is in the order that it happens. So he doesn't put strict time on when those things he's describing happen, and he overlays them. So
Paul does.
Paul does, yeah, but that's later. So when he's doing it...
How many years later?
Yeah, but even when Paul does that, he doesn't go into the description of all the details going up to the destruction of Jerusalem, does he, particularly?
Because he doesn't need to, because that's already been given.
Right, but he's mingled those two things in that passage, so he brings the Son of Man in there, he mingles it again and brings the Son of Man, and he doesn't...
Sorry? I don't know, you lost me then.
I think that they're going to pick out things from that history he's giving them and say, oh, we know this is the end of the world, this is the destruction of Jerusalem. So they can pick and choose now which events in there they're going to put in their time period, because they don't have events disclosed in their order.
Who doesn't?
The disciples.
In which chapter?
In this chapter.
It is. Every single verse is in order. It's explicitly all in order, I would argue.
Then how are they mingled? I don't see how they're mingled.
They're mingled because the destruction of Jerusalem is the destruction of the world.
Yeah, and I don't okay, that's done.
But that's not merciful to know that. There's no mercy in knowing that.
No, that's what I'm saying. So how is it mingled? If it's all strictly in order, I'm arguing it's not strictly in order. That's
Tell me which bits are not in order. Can you take your time? Tell me which bits are not in order. The only reason I argue they would, because if you go to Desire of Ages chapter 69, she lays it out blow by blow.
She does. We have it in order.
And it's in verse order. She does it.
Okay.
Now, we might argue about when you go to the synagogues or when there's a false Christ, all of that, or wars and rumours of war. We might argue what the explicit order of those events are, but all of those are the history of the disciples. There's 3 separate and distinct histories. 1, 2, 3. And the one that we don't have the information on is this one. And she says he's merciful in God's mercy. He doesn't do that. He says that in 630.5. She's quite explicit about that.
Yeah, that's true. He doesn't open up the long.
And she doesn't, and she and he doesn't explain why. So we could delve into why it's merciful not to describe that.
That's what I'm
and I would argue, I don't know what your thoughts are on why that would be merciful, is because why is this 1260 even happening? Because the church has apostatized. And I don't think the disciples could have handled, at that stage, there was going to be this rampant apostasy, that everything they had hoped and dreamed for was all going to come to a crash. They couldn't cope with that. So in his mercy, he just hides it. And then he also is hiding, if they're going into apostasy, which is before the 1260, what is the 1260? It's punishment. So they couldn't handle that God was going to punish not literally the disciples, but his disciples, because of their outright open apostasy. Because the enemies of the church are the Jews or the Romans, or let me say the enemies of God. The enemies of God are the Jewish church, the structure, or the Romans. Now you find out who are the enemies of God. It's his own people. It's the church. And who works for God now?
The one who punishes.
The one who punishes. This is the papacy. The roles get flipped around. All of that, I don't know if they could handle that. But that's what we'd have to work out and study out, why it's in his mercy that he doesn't show the intricacies of what happens here.
I guess speaking to that as well is the fact that they would be discouraged to do the work they're appointed to do, because all the work they're about to do in laying the church is going to be totally undone when everyone prophesies. They'll think, what's the point of doing this now?
So if I told you in 12 months, 3/4 of you aren't even going to be here, maybe more, what hope would there be? You'd sort of just say, well, there's no point in studying, there's no point in doing anything because I'm not going to be here anyway. Sorry? It'd be very discouraging. It's to realise that the church becomes the enemy of God because of their compromise. Okay, so we've got these two, maybe less than 3/4. So we've got these two histories, and we've got this one in the middle. So coming back to the question, the generation. It says this generation. Where are you going to mark this generation from? Put your hand up. Other Kefis?
So, not be very previous
Okay, well you didn't need to be in the class before because we haven't done anything. Everything that I'm asking now is based upon what we've just done in this class. We asked the question before, but we didn't answer it. So we've got 3 histories, 1, 2, 3, and it says, verse 34, this generation shall not pass till all these things. So to know what the generation is, you need to tell me what all the things are.
So that generation can refer to that history from the one that we brought there. From the history that the disciples are, the history that Christ is, the end of the history that he is addressing, the life that you have brought up there. But we can also make application that generation.
So you're saying all is this much?
Yes. So at one level, that's the generation that will not pass. But now we can factorize it in a sense that that generation, the signs that were associated with the time of the disciples, that can be the generation. And the signs that were associated with their history, that can be the generation, depending on which dispensation you're looking at.
Okay, so you said Millerite history, this one here, and yes, you weren't here in the last class, so I just want to call it the end of the world.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's Millerite history, and I think we discussed that.
Yeah. So you can, the point I'm making is that you can fractalize it because the dispensation of the disciples and the dispensation of that begins from maybe 1260 to the end of the world.
So, has anybody else got a response? My brother.
To me, I will place it from 1844 onwards.
From 1844 onwards. And where do you see 1844 here?
Okay, then if we go by this, we start from 1798, the end of the world.
Why did you want to go from 1844 if we're in this story?
The history of until 1844.
Because even in this story we've got 1798, we don't even have 1844.
Yeah, that's why I was citing, if we are going by this one, but 1844 comes after 1798. So
okay, so, before we move on, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 waymarks. Give me the dates. The dates. Give me the date for this.
The destruction of Jerusalem.
No, this.
That one is 31 AD.
So this is 31, and this?
That one is 70.
So I'll do it like that.
Yeah, then 538. 798.
This one?
Second coming. So I would mark it at the end of the world, between 1798 to second coming.
So all these things is this. Well, what about all of these things? So what I want us to do is you're in the Bible study and you're going to go to 34 and you want to demonstrate that it's the generation of the Millerites and the generation of the 144,000. So before you do that, you have to define what all is. So you have to explain some kind of logic or methodology to tell people what the all is.
I'd say from 1989, because of this statement here, in Desire of Ages.
So before you're saying that all these things is 1989?
Yeah, because it says that Christ has given signs of his coming. He declares that we may know when he is near at the door.
Where are you reading this from?
632 paragraph 3.
632. Paragraph 2.
Christ has given. Christ has given the sign of his coming.
Seen it?
Yep.
Says, Christ has given a sign of his coming. He declares that we may know when he is near, even at the doors. He says those of who see these signs. So that's why those who see these signs are not the ones who lived between 1798 and 1844, but those who are now in this last generation from 1989 to the second coming. They're the ones who are seeing the signs which are past and who are seeing these signs being fulfilled in their history. And the one called this generation.
So tell me in the verses where you see 1989 here.
That's when you first see them. Then I'll tell you.
Okay. So who's I talking to before? Oh yeah. Did you have a chance to think? If you haven't, you can take more time. Okay, take more time.
I have a different argument.
Tell me what the answer is first.
Yeah, that's the answer I'm giving. That this generation, we can now push it.
Tell me where you got all things. What are the all things?
Because I see the disciples, the destruction of Jerusalem is falling on the generation of the Jews too. So I would push it back from the beginning of the generation of the Jews where it began. Because the events that Christ is portraying are still in their generation.
So tell me, I want to know where all things begin and end.
From where the history of the Jews begin.
31?
No.
So when it says in verse 34, these, which chapter are you going to begin the these from? Like chapter 1?
I don't get it.
Verse 34 says, all these. These means the things that we've already spoken about. So how far you want to go back? Which chapter you want to begin at? Because you want to go further back than chapter 24, I presume. That's what you just said, if I understood you correctly.
You say, but this generation shall not pass till all these things. So your question was, which generation?
I'll put that one to one side, because first I want to do all the things first, because this will define the generation, not the other way round. So you tell me where all the things begin.
The things begin from the first sign that Christ gives, the destruction of Jerusalem.
That's here?
Yeah.
So it ends here?
Yeah.
So it's all of these things?
Yeah.
Okay, who had the hand up here?
Oh, I was just saying I agree with Kevin that all things is all that one.
All of this? So you agree with my brother over there?
Yeah, I think all these are those events that happened from the time of Christ up to 70 AD, because those events that happened, the deception that took place, the persecution that took place between 34 up to 70 AD, that generation that been during that time. I had to see those. But if you want to apply now from 1798 to the end of the world, of course the same thing will repeat. It will come again, the generation that will be blessed like the sun, the moon, because the moon and the sun and the sun and the stars never occurred between that time after 2080, but that generation that will be there, which means the last generation.
All things begin where?
31st.
And they end where? So all the things is this much.
Now you want to apply it, you can now begin against it.
I don't want to do anything. You tell me what you want to do. You tell me what to do.
Yeah, I say, all these things are those men that took place in the one after 20. And then I get 17, 19, up to the second time.
So you're doing this. Did I understand you correctly? My brother?
So I think all this is verse 29.
Sorry?
Verse 29. So he's referring to verse 29.
Why verse 29? Why are you not going earlier? So, tell me if I'm understanding you correctly. You want to go to verse 29, which is here. And so you're saying it's this,
Yeah.
all these things. Why won't you go earlier?
The reason I have to go earlier, so you will see from verse 9 to verse 5, it's talking of the same story. So it's telling us that the sun shall be darkened, moon, and then there's falling the stars. But if you go to look, it's going to give you the death threat to the nation. But in this scene, you're seeing Christ coming. But you also see the parable, but parable is referring us to verse 9. So all these events are taking place in the time of this generation.
So you said the parable.
Parable is also referring us to verse 29. There's a parable in the middle from verse 29.
Which parable?
Parable of the fig tree.
So the fig tree is here.
Yeah.
So what about the fig tree that's in the Gospels that he curses, which is the Jewish nation?
This one is different from that.
But that's a different one.
Yeah.
Okay. So you still haven't told me why you're only going to verse 29. Why it's only this one? I still didn't get that the logic.
This generation.
Yeah, but that's not an answer. It's not a satisfactory answer for me to say it's just this. I want to know, why is it just that? Why won't you go further back?
Why I should go there is because of this thing. So this thing that I mentioned already before.
Yeah.
So he was talking about some of the things.
So these things mentioned all the way back here. Why are you only marking these things?
So the verse is specified after the tribulation. So to go after the tribulation.
What I'm asking is where you get that from, that it's only after the tribulation. How you work that out from verse 34. That's all I'm asking, what the logic for that is. I understand what you're saying, but I'm asking what your logic is. I haven't seen it.
The logic that I go to verse 29.
And verse 29 doesn't say anything. It just says the sun, the moon and the stars. So why not false Christs? Why isn't that one of the things? Or the persecution, why isn't that one of the things?
You see here in King James, there are some symbols used here, and this symbol in verse 29 is telling us that Christ is talking from verse 29 to verse 35 is talking of one story. So, and I'm speaking from this story.
From verse 30 up to verse 35.
Up to verse 35, and verse 36 is different story.
When does the prophecy end?
Which one?
The one that Jesus is given in Matthew 24.
Ends at the second advent.
Which verse?
You can see that on the verse.
Verse 30.
Yeah.
Not verse 31.
Yeah, verse 31 also, verse 31.
So 29 to 31 is the last part of the prophecy.
Yeah.
So I can put 31 here.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Where do I put 29?
29 is 29, the time limit.
So I put 29 here. Okay, so the prophecy ends, because verse 32 says it's a parable.
Yeah.
So 32 is a parable. 33 says what? So likewise, what does that mean?
The same way.
The same.
Which is
The parable.
a comparison or a parable.
Yeah.
This generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. It's verse 34. It isn't contained here. This section's finished. Now you're into a new section. So we have to work out how we're going to deal with that new section. I don't think you can go up to verse 35.
I should not go to verse 35, but verse 35 I'm dealing with verse 34. This is where the question is about all these things. So these things, you see there is a connection between 33 and 34. And it's taking us to this type of parable, but parable is depending what in verse 29, 30 and 31.
I understand what you're saying, but all I'm asking is, what's your proof that you only limit it to 29 and not going back to whatever verse AD 31 is.
My proof is what the verse says.
Your proof is what the verse says.
What the verse says.
I'm reading what the verse says, and I didn't get it. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that I haven't seen that at the back.
I think it's correct. It's correct. It is from verse 29. This thing. The reason is because of verse 27, which says, "For the light will come out of the east." This is the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Verse 27?
Yeah.
What's that saying?
This is the end of everything. Jesus has come.
Has he?
By the lightning coming out of the east and shining out of the west, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. So you get verse 29. That's what I'm saying. These things must be from verse 29, not from the destruction of Jerusalem.
Okay, so you tell me. Someone give me this verse number and this verse number for those two waymarks. Which verse? Verse 3. So verse 3 is just a question. Are we okay with verse 5? For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. We could say that's Barabbas. So I've got verse 5 here, and the destruction of Jerusalem. When therefore ye shall see the abomination and desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains. But pray, the world to this time. Okay, so it's not that straightforward. So we put 15 to 20. So I'll put 15 to 20. We know that 15 is not 70, don't we? Because that's 66. But we'll cluster those verses together. And okay, so if we're okay there. So you told me verse 27. Is that right? So what I want to do is I want to start here with the timeline, and I've got 31 AD, and I'm going to start at verse 5, and I'm going to put the second advent here. So I'm at verse 5. So I'm going to. So you tell me when I get to verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor shall ever be, except those days shall be shortened. Tell me where 20. You want to put 27 here?
27,
yeah. So I'm going to put 27 here, and 26. I guess what I'm asking is, I started at verse 5, how do I get to verse 27? Is it just one line?
There's a 1260 there.
Okay, so tell me where the 1260 begins and ends.
In verses 5
The verses.
Verse 21.
21 to?
So verse 22.
21 and 22. Okay, so I'll do that. And then what about 23 to 27?
Those are the signs now that precede the second advent.
So this is the 1260, this is the disciples, and you've got 23 to 27 like that. Is that what you're saying? And then 29?
It's now.
So 28. Okay, we'll leave 28. 28 is a parable. Where do I put 28?
The destruction, the final destruction.
So you want to put 28 here. And then you want to put 29 there?
Yeah.
To 31.
Yeah.
Agree with that, Brother Rogers? Yeah? Brother Kefas? Yeah? You don't agree? Can you just speak a little bit louder so I can hear you and tell us why you don't agree?
Because Sister White says that in giving the discourses of Matthew 24, Christ blended the events. So in the narrative, when he is giving that narrative, he's not giving its intention. He's not giving what to take place sequentially. So when they ask him the sign, or when they ask the what shall be the end of, what shall be these things, or the end of all things, we cannot begin to mark it from verse 29. We have to begin to mark it from the point that he has to begin to illustrate, to give those events or those signs or those particular things. So it's not beginning from verse 29. Things that it is that the signs that are fulfilled. It begins to discuss from verse 4 by giving a warning that take heed that no one deceives. So they are not beginning to be written from verse 29. Begin to be written and begin from the history of the business.
Okay, so my specific question was, do we agree with this structure? Because I think the point you're referring to is where you mark all these things. So we've put that to one side, and I just want to address this because who was it? I forgot which brother it was. So you said that verse 27 belongs here. Okay, so I just want to address that. Are you going to address that?
When I'm looking at it, verse 27, Christ is trying to explain how he will come a second time because it responded to something that he had spoken about in verse 23 and 24, where it says that false Christ will appear, telling them that go to the desert and look for me. And then he's trying to tell them that that is not how I will come. I will come in this manner. So for me, it's not. And when we look at verses 23, it says, then, and he has just been explaining the verse 6 in verses 22. So the word then yesterday was saying that the word then can mean that things are going to follow or they are happening at the same time. So verse 23, then if any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. So I believe this was happening even during the 1260 years. They were running concurrently. So I'm not seeing verses 23 and verses 28 as a this, and verses 27 is that history of 1798 to the second coming. I'm seeing it as something that is still within the 1260, and verses 27 is just telling them how he shall come, because apparently there is a deception that he has just tried to introduce from verses 20.
So you're saying this history is when? 23 to 27?
It's running together in the 1260.
In the 1260.
That's what I'm saying.
So let's go to Desire of Ages. (631). So I'll read paragraph 1 and you want to go to paragraph 3? Now in unmistakable language our Lord speaks of his second coming, and he gives warning of dangers to precede his advent to the world. If any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. She's quoted Matthew 24:25. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he's in the desert, go not. Behold, he's in the secret chamber, believe it not. That's verse 26, she's quoting. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. As one of the signs of Jerusalem's destruction, Christ had said, Many false prophets shall arise and deceive many. Which verse is that?
No. That's five.
Okay, so let me just check. Verse 5. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many.
Yeah.
Sorry? For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. Let me just check something.
Combine two verses. Verse 11.
It's verse 11. Okay, it's verse 11. It's verse 11. And many false prophets shall arise and shall deceive many. So it's verse 11 that she's quoting. And as one of the signs of Jerusalem's destruction, Christ had said, Many false prophets shall arise and shall deceive many. False prophets did rise, deceiving the people and leading great numbers into the desert. Magicians and sorcerers claiming miraculous power drew the people after them into the mountain solitudes. But this prophecy was spoken also for the last days. So, she's quoting verse, what does it say about the desert? 26. So she's kept getting 26 and bringing it into the history of the disciples. So that's what she's done. And she says it also applies to this time period. So if it's 26 that she mentioned, you then go back to verse 23. So 23 to 27 would also be in this history, even though it's not that she's saying that's what's going to happen. Verse 27 is an event. Verse 27, I think as Brother Robert said, is an explanation or an argument against the desert argument. Because people are saying, go to the desert, that's where you'll find Jesus. And Jesus says, no, you won't find me that way. You're going to find me because when I come, I'm going to come in a visible manner. So I don't think verse 27 is actually talking about the event itself. It's just an argument that's going to be used. It's an argument that you have false prophets in this history and false prophets in this history. So I'll just read on a bit further. This sign is given as a sign of the second advent. Even now, false Christs and false prophets are showing signs and wonders to seduce his disciples. Do we not hear the cry, Behold, he is in the desert? Have not thousands gone forth into the desert, hoping to find Christ? And from thousands of gatherings where men profess to hold communion with departed spirits, is not the call now heard, Behold, he is in the secret chambers? What verse is that one? So that's verse 26. He's in the secret chambers, believe it not. Secret chambers is what? The spiritualism. This is the very claim that spiritists put forth. But what says Christ? Believe it not, for as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And then there's the parable of the eagles.
Then the next paragraph.
So that's 631, paragraph 2.
The Savior, his signs, is something that
the Saviour gives signs of his coming, and more than this, he fixes the time when the first of these signs shall appear. So I think that's moving on to the next section. That's going to pick up from here. So I don't know if that's directly connected to that statement before. So I would suggest that when we go to 23 to 27, it's as much this history, the arguments that are going to be given in this history, as the arguments given in this history. In fact, 27 isn't talking about the second advent. It's not the event itself. It's the argument or the proof of what the second advent looks like. Does that make sense, the distinction between the two? 27 is not the second advent. 27 is the description of what the second advent looks like. And that description is going to be given, or that argument is going to be given here and here.
When we read verse 28, because I see I've placed it in the second advent.
Verse 28.
Yeah.
So verse 28 is a parable. So I don't know if we all agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah? It's not part of the prophecy itself, it's a parable. And this parable is connected to these verses that are just before it. And what is the parable teaching us? So maybe not a parable, it's a proverb. I think it's actually a proverb, not a parable. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. If you go to Luke 17, so Luke 17 verse 37 has the same proverb given there. And they answered and said unto him, Where, Lord? And he said unto them, Wheresoever the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together. That's Luke 17:37. So, what is this proverb teaching? What does the proverb mean? It says, where the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered. It says eagles, but they're not really eagles. I think they're vultures. Because eagles I don't think they eat dead bodies like that. Vultures do. So what's that saying? Just literally. Yeah.
That you only find vultures where there is something that is wrong.
Yes.
So in this case, like the reason why these people are going to the desert is because they themselves are something about the seers.
Okay. Did everybody hear what he said? They didn't hear what you said.
I'm saying literally the reason why you only find vultures where there is something that is rotting, like a carcass.
So you've got a dead body, and you've got these vultures all spread out in different places. And what they're going to do?
A lot of that dead body is going to come together.
They're all gathering together. So that's what the literal is. It says all these scattered vultures are all going to come to one place. They get attracted by this carcass.
So I'm assuming that the reason why he draws this parable in is he has just been explaining of how people will be deceived at the end of the world. So the reason why they are being misled or deceived is because they themselves are, I don't know how to explain, they are, all these false guys at the end of the world in this context are going to come together because they're being called by what brings them together.
So what do vultures love?
The red veils.
They love these things here, and they'll all come to this common place.
So who is the carcass? Is it the false Christ who is attracting the vultures who are the people who are doesn't know how can we...
So it can be positive or negative. So you can either love, if this was, let's call this doctrine. So if you've got false doctrine, if you believe the false Christs, if you love them, all of you will be gathered to that false Christ, because that's what you love. But if this is a true Christ, the true message, then these vultures, these disciples, they will be attracted to the true. So whatever you love, that's what you're going to be attracted to. That's what this parable is teaching. So if you're going to believe the false prophets, you're loving them, you're going to be attracted to their errors. But equally so, if you loved Christ and trusted in Him, you'd be attracted to Him. So it's just a simple parable or a proverb.
Actually, you can see it from verse 34 to 37. Verse 34 says, I tell you in that night, because you know the night is the night of spiritual darkness.
So you're back into Luke 17.
Yes.
So go back to Luke 17, because we cut into the passage.
Luke 17, verse 34, 37. Actually, the Bible starts from 34, then to 37. Says,
Okay, so I'll read them and you explain. Okay? Just for the camera.
Okay.
I tell you that in that night there shall be two men in one bed. The one shall be taken and the other shall be left. Two women shall be grinding together. The one shall be taken and the other left. Same language as Matthew 24. Two men shall be in the field. The one shall be taken and the other left. And they answered and said unto him, Where, Lord? And he said unto them, Wheresoever the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together.
There are lots of symbols in this, but they are not it's not plain. When we look at the night, it's also a symbol used in that parable. The two men, the night can show us that in a period of spiritual darkness, there will be two men. Men represents the gospel messengers, the servants of God. They will be in one bed. We know the bed can also be a symbol of spiritual death. One shall be taken, the other left. This we see separation of two classes. Then two women, we know the women is a symbol of the church. So we know here automatically during this time of spiritual darkness, there are two churches which are contemporaries, shall be grinding together. To grind, we know a wheat can be grinded, which after grinding the wheat, you make it into a flour and bake bread for your members in the church. But at the same time, we see these women grinding wheat to make bread for their members. One shall be taken and the other left. Two men shall be in the field. Here we also represent the gospel messengers who are in the field. And they are preaching, they are giving the gospel message. One will be taken, the other will be left. Then it ends by they ask the question, Where, Lord? Then it says, Wherever the body is, there the eagles will be gathered. I will answer it in negative, that they will be taken for destruction.
Are we okay with that parable? Wherever the body is, whether you have it positive or negative, that's what you'll be attracted to. I just want to point out, I don't know if we picked up when Brother Robert said this, when you go to verses 23 to 27, Ellen White makes an application here, and she says, so it was in the end of the world. But if you take the story as given in the sequential order, which is, and I'm pretty sure that this whole prophecy is in sequential order, these verses would be tucked into this history of the Dark Ages. Because verse 29 says, the tribulation is ended, and verse 21 says the tribulation has begun. So 21 to 28 is the history of the tribulation. And I think these verses also apply here in the way that this is structured. And the reason I say that, I don't know if Brother Robert had any further thoughts on that, is because this argument about the eagle and the body and who you're going to believe and who you're not going to believe, these false Christs, who is the false Christ? It's the papacy. This is Thyatira, the seduction and the teaching of all these false versions of what the gospel looks like. it's all really comes to its height in this history here of the 1260. So I think the primary application would be here, and again it would be structured just the way this one is here. So verses 23 to 27 would be tucked into this history, which is a bit of an explanation of what's going on there. And when Ellen White comments on it, she certainly comments that people was led into the desert in the history of the disciples, and then she says there's going to be false Christs. I think she says to the end of the world or something like that, sort of in a generic sense. So they're always going to be false Christs, but I think its primary application was in the Dark Ages. It's about the papacy. She brings it back here. She makes an application of it there. So I don't think 27 is the second advent. I think the structure of the chapter is actually really simple to understand. It's one of the few that are in sequential order. So I just want to add one more point onto that. I know we've finished, but it's verse 21. And the reason I want to go to verse 21 is because sometimes when it says in verse 21, for then shall be great tribulation such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Sometimes people go to Daniel 12:1. So if you go to Daniel 12:1, it says, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. So what you can do is you can proof text, and you can show that Daniel 12:1 and Matthew 24, verse 21 are the same event. So my understanding is we have to be really careful about proof texting. We know proof texting, you've probably heard people say we don't use the historical and grammatical methodology because they're like from Satan or something, but we're proof texters, and often we do proof texting wrong. It's really easy just to get a word and run it through, and you can come up with some strange answers. So we have to be really careful about proof texting. It's not the only rule that we have, and I don't know if it's even the primary rule that we have. It's a useful tool, but it's only one in the armory or the methods of what we should be using. So if you were to do that, I'm suggesting you're going to come up with the wrong answer, because what you end up doing is you take, where is Daniel 12:1, this time of trouble, when Michael stands up? So we know that's here. We agree with that? This is 12:1. So what we're going to do is, if we make 24:21, if we make that this same period, what you end up doing is you end up destroying this structure, and it becomes you end up confusing yourself if you're not careful. So I just want to read what Ellen White says when she comments on this. We did read this, 630.5. When I read it, I didn't read to the bottom. 630.5. So as you're turning it, I'm just going to read from where we read. From the destruction of Jerusalem, Christ passed on rapidly to the greater event, the last link in the chain of this earth's history, the coming of the Son of Man in majesty and glory. Between these two events, there lay open to Christ's long view centuries of darkness, centuries for his church marked with blood and tears and agony. Upon these scenes his disciples could not then endure to look, and Jesus passed them with a brief mention. Then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Now we know that this time of trouble here, Jacob's time of trouble, we don't know how long it's going to be. It could be a few weeks, a few months, maybe a year, I have no idea. But we know it's not long centuries. We all know that. So when she quotes verse 21 in Desire of Ages 630.5, she's marking this as the Dark Ages, the 1260. So the Great Tribulation here, which is so bad, there was never a time like this before, even though it sounds the same as Jacob's time of trouble, it's not. It's two separate histories. So it's never been this bad and it's never been this bad. It shares similar language, but they're separate events. Just want to make sure that we're okay with that, because that came up as a question. So let's summarise. We haven't quite cleared up what all the things are yet, but hopefully what we've done is that we're all on the same page, we're all in agreement that the verses are sequential. I acknowledge that from verse 5 to verse 20, you can't say everything is happening one after the other. They're happening at the same time. You know, there's persecution, there's wars, rumours of wars. They're all happening concurrently. So you could have verse 5, verse 6, verse 7. They could all be doing that, for instance. There's some overlap, I acknowledge that. But all of this is the history of the disciples. All of this is the history of the Dark Ages, and all of this is the history of the end of the world. Without doing that, I don't think you can come to this place and come to some proper concrete decisions without accepting that. And I don't want us to force fit this in. Maybe if you read chapter 69, Desire of Ages, you'll see that that's what she does. I think it's pretty clear to see it in the verses itself. So all we need to do is find out what all the things are. If it's all of this history, just this history, or these two histories, we've done that. So we have to finalise that. What we have done is we've taken the 1260 out of this story. So essentially all you've got is two dispensations, the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world. And this one, Christ has sort of tucked that out and just put the two together, not even just together, he put them one on top of another. So hopefully we're all in agreement with that. Okay, so let's pray. Heavenly Father, we give you praise and thanks for your goodness, for your marvellous dealing with your people. Help us, Lord, to have a clearer understanding of what at first sight seems a relatively simple and straightforward passage of Scripture. A simple Ellen White comment. But Lord, we know that there are many hidden treasures to be found in these passages of inspiration. Please be with us and guide us as you teach us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.